Section 8.2.11-T. Suppose a simple random sample of size n, which is equal to 75, is obtained from a population whose size is n, which is equal to 15,000. Capital N represents the entire population, and whose population proportion with a specified characteristic is P, which is equal to 0.7. We're going to complete parts A through C below. Part A, we want to describe the sampling distribution of the sample proportion. Okay, so recall that for a simple random sample of size n, such that n is less than or equal to 0.05 times capital N, where n is the size of the population, the shape of the sampling distribution of the sample proportion is approximately normal, provided that np times 1 minus p is greater than or equal to 10. And then determine the 5% of the population size. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to first determine the population size. Okay, so we want to find out if n is going to be less than or equal to 0.05 times capital N, where the sample is 75 and the entire population is 15,000. Okay, so we know n is 75. We want to see if that's going to be less than 0.05 times 15,000. So we know that 75 is going to be less than or equal to 750. So that checks. Okay, next what we want to do is we want to determine now the shape, if it's approximately normal or not. And so in order to do that, we need to find out if n times p times 1 minus p is going to be greater than or equal to 10, where we know that n is the sample size, which is 75, and p is equal to 0.7. So we have 75 times 0.7 times 1 minus 0.7, and we want to see if that's going to be greater than or equal to 10. Well, we get 15.75, which is greater than or equal to 10, so that tells us that it's going to be approximately normal. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we're going to find out what the mean is. And so now that we've gotten the sampling distribution is approximately normal and the sample is less than 5% of the population, the mean of the sampling distribution of the sample proportion is the same as the population proportion, and the population proportion is 0.7. So therefore we can say that the mean of the sampling proportion, which is equal to P, which is equal to 0.7. Okay, so that's part 3. Okay, so now what we want to do is now we want to determine the standard deviation of the sampling distribution of the sample proportion, rounding to 3 decimal places. So we know that the formula for that the standard deviation of the sample proportion is going to equal the square root of p times 1 minus p over n, where p is equal to 0.7 and we know that n is equal to 75. So let's go ahead and fill that in. So that's going to equal the square root of 0.7 times 1 minus 0.7 divided by 75. And so that's going to equal the square root of 0.0028. And so therefore we can get the standard deviation of the sample proportion to be approximately 0.052915. Okay, so now we want to know what is the probability of obtaining X is equal to 54 or more individuals with the characteristic. That is, what is the probability that the sample proportion is going to be greater than or equal to 0.72. Okay, So what we already know and what we're given is the fact that we want to find the probability of the sampling proportion to be greater than or equal to 0.72. Okay, so let's draw our bell curve so that we can see what we're looking at here. Okay, that we know that the mean is the proportion, and we know that that's going to be 0.7. And we're looking for the area that's going to be greater than 0.72. So we're looking for that area. Okay, so we're going to use technology. So we're going to use normal CDF. We know that our lower bound is 0.72. We know that our upper bound is going to be 9999. We know that our mean is 0.7, and the standard deviation in step 4 is 0.052915. So let's go ahead and put that in our calculator. So we have second distribution, go to normal CDF. We know that our lower bound is 0.72. Our upper bound is 9999. We know that our mean is 0.7, and our standard deviation is 0.052915. So therefore, now we're going to get our probability there. So we get the probability rounding it to 4 decimal places to be 0.3527. Now, if we wanted to then do this in statcrunch using our normal calculator, we know that our mean is going to be 0.7. We know that our standard deviation is 0.052915. We know that we wanted to find the value of when it's greater than 0.72. And then we can see that when we compute, we're going to get the same area as we got on our calculator. So to answer the question, what is the probability of obtaining X equals 54 or more individuals with the characteristic, which is the probability of the sampling proportion to be greater than or equal to 0.72, is 0.3527. Okay, now in part C, it says, what is the probability of obtaining X equals 48 or fewer individuals with this characteristic? That is, what is the probability of the sampling proportion to be less than or equal to 0.64? So again, we're looking for the probability that the sampling proportion is going to be less than or equal to 0.64. And again, looking at this on our bell curve, we know that our mean is 0.7. And we're looking for an area that is less than 0.64. So what we can do is we can use normal CDF with our lower bound to be negative 9999, our upper bound to be 0.64. We know that our mean is 0.7 and our standard deviation is 0.052915. So let's see what area that gives us, or probability. So we have negative 9999, comma 0.64 as your upper bound. We have 0.7 as our mean, and 0.052915 as our standard deviation. So therefore, we get the following answer. So rounding that to 4 decimal places, we get 0.1284. And if we were using the standard normal calculator on statcrunch, again, our mean is 0.7, standard deviation is 0.052915, and we're changing the inequality to be less than the value of 0.64, and then we're going to select compute, and then when we do that, then we get the following result. So therefore, again, you can see the area is similar to the one in the calculator. So the probability of obtaining x equals 48 or fewer individuals with the characteristic, which is the probability of the sample portion to be less than or equal to 0.64, is 0.1284.